Welcome into another edition of Finding Freedom. Before we get rolling today, I want to quickly tell you about I Trust Capital. If you're someone who maybe has an old 401k that you moved into an IRA somewhere when you left a job, you just have the money sitting there. What do you do with it? Try to invest in stocks, whatever other bull crap out there. What if you could invest that money in crypto? Invest it in physical gold and silver? Well, you can do that with I Trust Capital. But with I Trust Capital, you have the tax benefits of an IRA while trading in crypto assets. And on top of that, like I said, you can also have access to buying physical gold and silver into your account. It's amazing. If you sign up using promo code LIONS at I Trust Capital, you'll get the first month free. Now, I Trust Capital is safe and secure. They are backed by Coinbase Custody and Curve to secure clients' digital assets. And they have 320 million of insurance to make sure your funds are safe and secure. On top of that, they are trusted. They have 1,300 reviews on Trustpilot, and they are 100% transparent in their fees, which, I can't really say that about all other IRA providers. Now, whether you're holding your assets long-term or you want to buy and sell with the market, I Trust Capital's IRA gives your account, or provides the account, the lowest transaction fees for buying Bitcoin or other digital currencies. As an I Trust client, you'll be able to log into your account, make trades 24/7, trades execute in real time, and settle in seconds. They offer more cryptocurrencies than any other crypto IRA provider out there, and they're adding more all the time. Go to itrustcapital.com, use promo code LIONS for your first month free.
We are born free, and we will die free. The time in between, though, that's complicated. In that time, governments, institutions, and our egos will limit our ability to find true freedom in this life. These are real stories of real people overcoming the odds, persevering in justice, and unlocking their potential. Welcome to Finding Freedom. Here's your host, John Odermatt.
All right, we are live. I'm here with my guest today on Finding Freedom, Seth Ferranti. Seth is a filmmaker. He's a novelist, a comic book creator, journalist, and a former federal prisoner. Before going to prison, Seth spent 2 years as a fugitive. He was on the top 15, the U.S. Marshals top 15 most wanted list. He spent 21 years in prison, all told. He was, after being convicted, as an LSD Kingpin. While he was in prison, worked on his writing and developed that craft. Since then, he's written for tons of mainstream magazines and notable pieces. But most notably is his documentary, which I just watched on Netflix, White Boy, which is awesome. Some of you might be familiar with the movie White Boy Rick, based on the life of Richard Wershe Jr. So, Seth, welcome to Finding Freedom.
Hey, what's up, John? Thanks, man. Appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, man. Thanks for coming on the show. I think we have some mutual connections on Facebook. Some people that have been on my show in the past, Amy Pova, and people from that crew. A lot of people who Amy's helped get out of prison. But your story, you've gone from really the bottom, dealing drugs, getting convicted, being a fugitive, going through the system, and coming out on the other side and producing this awesome documentary, among many other things. So, I think this is a great story to tell, to share, not just for people who, are facing something like that, but people just going through especially in these crazy times, just going through the drags of regular life, and seeing that you can change your life and you can improve and you can evolve over time. So we're looking forward to speaking with you today. And I want to start really at the beginning. When you were a teenager selling drugs, if you can kind of start by sharing, what your situation was like back then, where you grew up, and how you got involved in the drug trade.
Yeah. First off, I want to say I'm glad you said Amy. I love Amy, beautiful person. What she does with the Can Do Foundation I mean, she's just a wonderful soul, man. So
Hmm.
how she tries to help all these people. So that's awesome that you had her on. She's a very good friend of mine. And yeah, back to me, man. You know, I kind of at 13, man, I just kind of took like a left turn in life. You know, up until that point, I was kind of like, you know, the all American kid. You know, honor roll, played sports, and then yeah, at 13, I kind of dove head first into drugs. You know, just first with cannabis and alcohol, and then you know experimenting with hallucinogens, you know, like mushrooms, LSD, and then getting into like what I would call harder drugs, like meth and cocaine. And yeah, man, I just kind of dove in, man. And I mean, it wasn't pretty. I don't know. I was seemed like I was searching for something. You know, I still think about it a lot today, and I've done a lot of introspection. You know, throughout the 21 years that I was in prison, and yeah, I really had an identity crisis. I really wasn't sure who I was. You know, I wasn't happy with who I was, and I kind of used drugs to kind of escape, you know, reality. And you know, I took it even further. I was just very self-destructive, you know, and I got myself on this path, doing drugs and eventually selling drugs, you know, that led to a 25-year sentence in the federal system as a first-time nonviolent offender. But you know, I think really I started selling drugs because you know I was taking drugs. So when I was taking drugs, I found out pretty quick that you know, like if you get drugs for other people, then you get free drugs. So that's kind of where it started for me. And then, you know, after a couple of years of doing that, I was, you know, kind of like in the position where I knew suppliers and I knew a lot of people, you know, that wanted to buy it. So I figured out, you know, by the time I was like 15 or 16, I figured out like, hey, man, not only can I get free drugs, but you know, I can make money doing this, you know, and
Hmm.
I can make good money. And so that's kind of how it all transpired for me. And I kind of went for, you know, probably like 13 to 17. I was really just kind of like doing whatever drug I could find and just kind of like abusing them and really kind of, you know, destroying myself in a certain regard. And then around 17, you know, it kind of clicked for me, you know, that, you know, I should do this as a business. And really, when I decided that, I really, you know, I didn't stop doing drugs, but I stopped doing the harder drugs, you know, what I would call harder drugs,
Hmm.
and just kind of, you know, stuck to like weed and alcohol and hallucinogen, and I got away from like, you know, what I would say are the more, you know, addictive drugs like cocaine and meth, you know, at
Right.
least
Yeah.
in my view, and I really kind of stopped doing those, and yeah, just concentrated on selling and even you know that I sold weed and psychedelics. So I always tell people I'd never consider myself a criminal. You know, I never carried a gun. You know, I didn't have a criminal organization. You know, I wasn't a gang leader. You know, I wasn't in the mafia. You know, nothing like that. You know, I was just a kid. You know, I sold weed and LSD and mushrooms at colleges. You know, and I had a lot of good connects. So I always tell people, you know, I wasn't a criminal. I was an outlaw. I broke laws that I thought were wrong. And really now, I mean, 30 something years later, I feel kind of justified, you know, with the way the world is now with legal weed and, you know, psychedelics being looked at, you know, for a
Hmm.
variety of uses in the medical and therapeutic field. So, you know, but at that time, I mean, you know, I'm man enough to admit that, you know, I was breaking the law, you know, and I had to pay the price. I mean, you know, undoubtedly I didn't want to, you know, do 21 years of my life in prison, but you know, that's what happened. So that's what I had to do.
Well, it's crazy. Yeah, you're talking about how far we've kind of evolved as a society here, and you were, I guess, you were dealing in the early '90s. Is that what it was?
Mostly late 80s. Yeah.
Late '80s.
My case was 91. So
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I mean, yeah, things have changed dramatically, and it's crazy to think, you know, when you became a fugitive, that someone, a drug dealer, a nonviolent offender, someone is on the top 15 most wanted list. But that was the mentality back then, right? So take us through that. I mean, how did you becoming a fugitive happen? Is it something that just one day you decided I got to run, or did you put a lot of thought into it? How'd that come about?
No, I put a lot of thought into it. So, first I had a state case. Some people got in trouble in the state, and they set me up. They actually tried to set me up. They did a sting. The sting wasn't even completed because I wouldn't make a deal with the narcotics officer. They were trying to get me to make a deal, and I refused to make a deal with them. So then after that, but I still got arrested and I got charged on the state. And then they moved the case federal, because this is 91, summer 91, it's like right when the war on drugs was kind of kicking into gear. So they moved my case federal as soon as they found out, that the LSD I was getting was being shipped from San Francisco. So, right from the jump, I kind of had, my wheels were spinning because I was like, man, I didn't like, what my lawyer was telling me. I had a state lawyer, then I had to get a federal lawyer. And they were telling me, like, I'm looking at like 20 to life. And I'm like, 20 to life? I'm like, for what? I was like 20 years old, and not to say, I wasn't like a little small time retail dealer. I mean, I was a wholesaler. I used to wholesale at colleges. I would get like 100 pounds of weed at a time, and I would get like 10,000 hits of acid at a time, and I would distribute at like 15 colleges in 5 states on the East Coast. So I mean, in no ways am I trying to say that I was a small dealer,
Mm-hmm.
but in the same regard, I mean, I wasn't Pablo Escobar. I wasn't John Gotti. I wasn't this big, huge drug dealer making millions of dollars. For a teenager, for a 20-year-old, yeah, I was, I was doing pretty good. I was probably at times, I was probably making, like, profiting, 20, 25 grand a month, but still, I had like a little run, man, like 17, I kind of got serious about selling drugs. And then, really right at the end, I maybe had about a 9-month run where I was kind of like, at my height, making that kind of money, so I had like a little 9-month run. So, when they started saying 20 years, I was just like, man, I'm like, there's no way I'm not doing 20 years, 20 years to life. I was like, they're crazy. Right. So, the first thing they do is well, like, if you don't want to do 20 years, you can cooperate. And I'm like, well, whatever. I'm like, well, what's that entail? Because I mean, I didn't grow up in the mafia. I didn't have like this death before dishonor code. I mean, I didn't really know anything about the federal system and how it works. I was really ignorant to that fact. So they're like, they're talking about cooperation. And then, as soon as that was basically the only way you can cut your sentence in the feds, by putting cases on other people. And as soon as I found out, what that was about, I was like, well, I don't want to do that. So then I was kind of left, that was my two options. It was like cooperate and get less time, or, go to trial and face 20 to life. So I didn't like either of those options. So immediately, I planned in my mind, I'm like, man, how can I get out of this? How can I escape? What can I do? So I immediately started, watching shows I'd seen before, but like America's Most Wanted. And, I knew about these shows. They were very popular in the 80s, and like
Mm-hmm.
Unsolved Mysteries. So, I started kind of doing like a deep dive into these shows, and watching and kind of trying to learn, like, how did they chase fugitives? How did they catch them? And then at the same time, I already had fake IDs because I used to go to all the colleges, and to get in the bars, we would get fake IDs made. These were like, only fake IDs that would, stand up, for like bouncers when it was dark, so it wasn't
Right,
like they
yeah.
would stand up under law enforcement scrutiny. But, I had a couple fake IDs, so I already knew about fake IDs. So then I started thinking, like, well, how can I get better fake IDs? How can I get fake IDs, or IDs in different people's names that'll stand up to the scrutiny of law enforcement, if I'm going to be this fugitive on the run. So I started researching, I started getting these. They had some companies back then called like Loom Panics Unlimited and Paladin Press. Like they were, known as like underground books.
Yeah, this
And
is before the internet, really. I
yeah,
mean,
before the
yeah.
internet. Yeah. So these are like, subversive books or whatever. Like one of the most famous books that these companies sold was like the Anarchist Cookbook,
Hmm.
which tells you how to like make meth. So they had all these books, and I found all these books like Reborn in the USA, Paper Tripping 1, 2, and 3, Understanding USA, Identifying Documents. So I ordered, there's like 25 of these books. So I ordered all these books and I started reading them. And basically, through that, I found out how to get, IDs and other people's names, like what they call it paper tripping. So I found out how to paper trip. So as soon as I had this knowledge and I knew I didn't want to cooperate, I knew that I didn't want to face 20 to life. And I had a little bit of money stashed, not a lot, but I had a little bit of money. So, I figured I would be good and be able to hide out, for about 6 months.
How much is a little bit of money? Like, how much did you have?
I had about 20 grand.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Back then, that would go a lot farther than today, for sure.
yeah, oh, yeah.
Yeah.
No, of course. It was about, I figured like 6 months. It would help me out for about 6 months, and then I would have to find some other means of income. But yeah, and I knew too, right? When you become a fugitive, when you take off, it's like those first, because most people get caught right away. So it's those first couple of months, it's those first 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 months, when people get caught. And if you get through that, then you might be able to last a little longer. But because by then, 6 months, they're going to move on to the next fugitive. They're going to move on to the next case. They kind of forget you, or at least that was my thinking. So, I had all this already in my mind, but another thing I did is like I wanted to throw them off the trail. So I was like, what can I do to throw them off the trail?
Hmm.
And so I remember, we were in Northern Virginia, and I used to read the paper. I was a big sports fan, so I would read the Washington Post. We got it. I would read it every day, and I would flip right to the sports section. Well, right before the sports section is the Metro section. So a lot of times, the Metro section headline might catch my eye, and every now and then in the Metro section, you would see like, person commits suicide, at Great Falls National Park, by jumping into the Potomac River. So like through my teenage years, I'd seen this a lot, man. I mean, I'd seen this probably like 10, 15 times, headline
Hmm.
on the Metro. So that stuck in my mind. And I was like, you know what? When I was planning all this, I was like, and like I planned all this, it wasn't long. I planned all this in maybe like 2 months, from maybe like August until I took off in October. So the feds got involved in August, and then, I took off in October. So I was like, you know what, I'm going to fake my suicide. So I made this whole elaborate ruse, and I went down, and I took my car to Great Falls National Park, parked in the parking lot. I put a suicide note on the, taped it to the dash. And then I went down and walked on a trail. And then like on a trail, I went off the trail in the area you're not supposed to go, like on the rocks. And then it's like the Potomac River. And in this area in the Potomac River, it's like class 5 rapids, and there's like a lot of rocks. So it's like, if you jump in the water, you can't swim. You're just going to be like smashed into the rocks, So that was my idea. So I staged it. I put all my stuff there, and, I hung out. I had like a vodka bottle, some cigarettes, my wallet, ID, some money in the wallet. And I waited till some people like walked by, because a lot of people hike the trail. And as soon as I saw, some people, I jumped out and I said, my friend, he jumped. And then, I took off, and I had somebody meet me and take me to the airport, and I flew to LA. So, and then I kind of monitored the progress as I went to LA, and I saw like when it first came out in the newspaper, in the Washington Post.
Did you leave? Did you leave identification back there that it was you that
Yeah,
had
yeah,
jumped?
yeah,
Like,
yeah. I
okay.
staged it. Yeah, I left my wallet with my ID and everything.
So how'd you get on? I guess
So
back then, did you need your ID to get on a plane, or I guess you had other fake
no,
IDs
no,
then?
no. Yeah, I had fake IDs, but you didn't need your
Okay.
ID back then. You
Hmm.
could go back then. You could go right. This is like pre 911, so you could go like right to
Okay.
the airport, and you could say like you could pay cash and give them John Smith
That's right. Yeah.
and just walk right through. And and they had metal detectors, but that's all they had. They just had metal detectors, you know?
Hmm.
So, I mean, it was a lot different world, you know? So, yeah, I flew one way to LA, and then, you know, I was stayed right in Hollywood, and I was checking, you know, back then they had newsstands. So I would go to the newsstand every day because, you know, the big newsstand has papers from all the big cities. So I would check the Washington Post every day. And at first I was like, man, my ruse worked, because they said, you know, like Fairfax LSD Kingpin, you know, commit suicide, you know, and I was like, man, I was like, I got him, you know, like I'm so smart, you know, I thought I was brilliant or whatever, you know, like I'm
Hmm.
Mission Impossible or something like that, you know, criminal mastermind, whatever. But then I kept reading the papers, and after 2 weeks, the prosecutors, you know, there was a headline in the papers where the prosecutors said, you know, they basically called my suicide. They said it was a fraud. You know, they said it was a hoax. They said because the U.S. park rangers, they dragged the river, you know, for 2 weeks, and you know, there was a dam, like where I staged it. There was a dam, and they dragged the river for 2 weeks, and they never found a body. So they declared my suicide a hoax. So then I realized that I messed up. Right, I staged my suicide on the wrong side of the dam. So that was like
Oh.
one. That was like one fact that just eluded me, you know, because you know, I had everything right, but that's the one thing I didn't catch from the articles, that, you know, if you wanted your body to wash out to the Atlantic Ocean, you had to stage your suicide on the other side of the dam. So,
Hmm.
you know, whatever. You know, without, you know, I was a kid. You know,
Hey, 2 months of planning. Yeah, it's, I mean,
I was smoking lots of weed. You know, I just forgot that one detail, but you know.
so what happens then? You're in California. I mean, you're now a fugitive from the law. You got like $20,000 in your pocket. Eventually, you're gonna have to work again. You made it 2 years, so obviously you made it past those initial few crucial months that you were talking about. So take us through that timeline, that 2 year timeline.
Yeah. So after 6 months, I kind of ran out of money. Um, you know, I was in Hollywood, man. I was partying, you know, trying to get girls, stuff like that. So, like after 6 months, I ran out of money, and I don't know. I tried to get some jobs. You know, I had some fake IDs, but I don't know. I don't think the job market was very good. You know, I went to some. I remember going to interviews, and it seemed like there was like hundreds of people going to interviews. So I never got a job. So I tried though. So eventually, I was like, well, whatever. I went back to Texas. You know, I needed some income. I needed you know, a way to make money. So I went back to Texas. I hooked up with my Mexican weed supplier. You know, he didn't even know I was busted. He was just like, "Oh, where you been for 6 months?" I was like, "Oh, I was just laying low." So I just went back there, and I started getting weed from him, and I was actually selling weed in Dallas, Texas area, to mostly like restaurant people. You know, like waiters, waitresses,
Hmm.
cooks. You know, I befriended this one guy. He was a cook at a restaurant, and moved in with him, and we had like a little party apartment, and I would sell weed to all the waiters and waitresses. And but the only thing in Texas, I mean, back then the brick pot, you know, we're talking like 91, 92. The brick pot in Texas was like super plentiful because it was all coming up, you know, across the border from Mexico. That was like the main entry point. So the weed was plentiful, so you really couldn't make that much money, man. You couldn't, you know, so I was like barely surviving. So then the cook that I was living with, he was from St. Louis. So, you know, eventually he was like, "Hey man, I'm gonna go up, you know, I'm gonna go home for the weekend, you know, see my parents and stuff, you know, party with my high school friends." He's like, "You know, you want to come?" And I was like, man, you know, because I knew before that's how I made money by, you know, I would get weed from one place and smuggle it to another place where it was more valuable. So I started
Hmm.
asking him, like, you know, how much can you sell, you know, pounds up there for? You know, people that will buy it. And he was like, yeah, I think so, man. I know some people. So, you know, I went to my Mexican guy. I got him to front me like 20 pounds, and we drove it up there. And that first time, I don't even think I sold, I didn't even sell the whole 20 pounds. You know, I maybe sold, you know, about three-fourths of it. But I made some connections. And then that was like my new thing. I started running, you know, loads of weed from Dallas up to St. Louis. And then eventually in St. Louis, I got hooked up with some college kids, you know, up in Mizzou. That's Columbia, or, you know, Missouri State. up in
Hmm.
Colombia, and like they were moving even more weed up there. And at this time, I say college kids, but at this time, I'm like 21, so I'm basically college age too. So and that was kind of my new thing, and I started doing that for about 18 months. Started getting my mojo back, started kind of, partying more, hanging out with people, having girlfriends, feeling like I'm getting my life, even though I'm living as a fugitive and I got fake IDs. Nobody knows my real name or that I'm wanted or anything like that.
And this whole
I'm
time, are you on the U.S. Marshals top
yeah,
15 most
yeah. I'm
wanted
on the
list? Yeah.
top 15 most wanted list this whole time, which I didn't even know none of that until I got caught. I didn't know I was
Huh.
top 15 U.S. Marshals list. I had no idea. So yeah, eventually I do this, but this is the height of the war on drugs. This is like 91 to 93. So this was when they viewed cannabis like heroin.
Hmm.
So eventually I got caught. I got busted on a weed charge in Missouri. They mashed up my prints, and they were like, "Oh, we got this guy." And then they released me on the initial charge because they didn't know who I was. But then they found out who I was, and then the fugitive, like the regional U.S. Marshals Fusional Task Force came and started busting in doors at everybody I knew, and eventually somebody told them where I was, and they came and busted down my door and got me. And this was '93, and they extradited me back to Virginia and sentenced me to 25 years.
Wow. So before we leave the life as a fugitive, what actually Amy told me months ago, or maybe even longer than that, to get you on the show. But then I saw you on Fox News talking about the Brian Laundrie, him being a fugitive now, what he's doing. So I want to get your opinion on that. He's been a fugitive for what, for 2 months, 16, or I guess maybe 8, maybe 6 weeks.
Yeah, yeah,
So
maybe a month and a half. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. So I think,
but different world today. But what do you think? Do you think he can? If he is, maybe he's not alive. I don't know. Who knows? But do you think he's alive
yeah,
still?
I think he's hiding, man. I think like I've maintained the whole time that I think he's close to home, so he's in there, Florida, a neighboring state. Because the main thing with being a fugitive, the main thing why most people get caught is because they're desperate because they don't have any resources, so they have to resort to crime. And when you're resorting to crime on a daily basis, your chances of getting caught by law enforcement increase dramatically. So I believe he's close to home. I believe, you know, he's close to home because of resources, because of his parents. There was that 3, 4, 5 days, where he came back and he probably broke down and told his parents, whatever happened, whatever didn't happen. I don't know. He deserves his
Hmm.
day in court, just like anybody else.
Right.
All I can say is, if he did hurt that girl, he deserves everything he has coming to him and more. But
Hmm.
whatever happened, happened. And parents are going to love their kids. Whatever happened, and he could have spun it any way he wanted to, and of course, his parents are going to believe him. So I believe they had time, to make plans and have contingencies and figure out like what he was going to do. Whatever the plan was, they had time to make a plan. So they had time to plan out how they're going to get him resources to run stuff through liaisons. So yeah, I believe he's holed up in an apartment somewhere, man. I don't know, maybe Florida, Louisiana, one of those neighboring states, man. You
Yeah.
know, with a friend or a relative. They probably send him somewhere, and his parents are indirectly helping him. Funneling him resources. While he either waits for this to all die down, which I don't know if it's going to die down. It's a crazy story in the news cycle right now. It seems like everybody is raptured by this whole story. Inflaming a lot of passions and stuff like that, and a lot of interest. But also, if he's going to stay a fugitive, he's going to have to get, some legitimate ID. He's going to have to alter his appearance. He's going to have to do something. So maybe that's all stuff that he's thinking about. But, like I said on Fox News, whatever, man. If you did it, if you didn't do it, turn yourself in, man, face the music. Cause I can tell you, man, life is a fugitive. even though, I kind of felt like I got my life back and I was selling drugs again. I mean, looking back, I mean, it's a terrible mental burden. I mean, that whole time when I was a fugitive, I was smoking weed from morning to night. I was every afternoon, I was drinking alcohol, getting wasted. I was just
Hmm.
basically, you know, like dampening, myself because it's such a tremendous mental burden. And it was a mental burden for me. And like I say, I didn't know I was top 15 US Marshals list, but you know, I know the mental burden that I was facing, that I endured, and the scrutiny on my case is nothing like his.
Yeah. Did
So
you
I
deal
can't
with
even
a?
imagine the mental burden that he's facing right now.
Yeah, I mean, he's got the anxiety and paranoia has got to
Yeah,
be
paranoid. Yeah.
overwhelming. Yeah.
So, I mean, who knows? I mean, he could be abusing drugs. Who knows what he's doing? I don't know. Unless maybe he's an adrenaline junkie or a psychopath and it's probably all cool. Who knows?
Who knows? Yeah. Did you deal with that? I mean, did you deal with any paranoia when you were on the run?
Yeah, no, especially the first 6 months. Yeah, the first 6 months. I mean, paranoia, anxiety. I thought the feds were around every corner.
Hmm.
I was like really cautious. I thought they were gonna like bust in and get me at any time. I mean, it took me like a good 6 months to kind of figure like, like I'm okay.
Hmm.
You know, they're not they're not around the corner. There's no Sherlock Holmes on the course. I mean, because basically, law enforcement nowadays, and even back then, throughout this war on drugs era, I mean, they're not like detectives or like inspectors. Everything they get is through informants. So I mean, these guys don't have like those Sherlock Holmes type of skills.
Hmm.
Like when you look at or Inspector Clouseau or anything like that. You know what I'm saying? So it's
Yeah.
just that's not how law enforcement is today. It's just people tell. So but I was very I cut off contact with everybody I knew previously. For my previous life, I didn't have contact with anybody. And the people, like I said, the Mexican smuggler, he didn't even know anything about my case. So, and he didn't know anybody I knew anyhow. So, that's like one of the only people I felt safe, but like I didn't call my mom, I didn't call my dad, I didn't call my brother, my sister, no old girlfriends, like I was basically dead to everybody.
Hey, we're going to take a real quick break here, guys. I want to tell you guys about an awesome new community, a new app, a new way to build your network, to meet new people, new like-minded people, and grow your business. If you heard Monday's episode, you heard Jason Stapleton and Dave Smith, and you heard Jason talking about his new Nomad network, and it's really cool. Two ways to join: you can join for free, or there is a paid account. And I mean, I'll tell you what. I mean, you guys know that I'm someone who is very passionate about diversifying your income. If you're locked into a corporate job, you're just waiting to have the door slammed on your toe. So diversifying your income, and as Jason talks about, building some skills, building some unique skills that you can market and you can sell. So what the Nomad Network is, and whether you have an existing business or you're looking to start one, or if you simply want to get around and start talking to some like-minded people, the Nomad Network is definitely the place for you. And it's free to join. You can go to www. Now, I say that because for this link to work, you have to put in the www.nomadnetwork.app/lions. So right now you can do that. You can see what everyone's talking about. Free to get in there. If you want to upgrade to a paid membership and get other perks, get into the inner circle, you can do that as well if you'd like to. You don't have to. And just to tell you a little bit more about this network, it's really cool. There's actually a job posting board where you can go in and see different things that other entrepreneurs, other like-minded people are looking for. Maybe someone to build a website, looking for someone to do some Facebook ads. I'm actually linking up with someone that I might be doing that for them. I used to do Facebook ads. I'm looking to get back into it just to make some more income in that area. Maybe doing graphics, maybe programming, all kinds of different things. This is a growing community, and guys, this is going to be huge. I'm telling you right now, it's going to be big. So go to www.nomadnetwork.app/lions and get your free account today. Mm-hmm. That's crazy. So to go from that, to go from life on the run over 2 years, and then you're in prison, you're early 20s, you're facing 20 years. You ended up serving, what, 21 years in prison, right? But at the time, you thought you could have been in longer than that, right? So with that out ahead of you at the beginning of your time in prison, what was your mindset? What was your mental state like? I mean, how are you dealing with that?
Yeah, first when I first went to prison, I was extremely cautious. I was scared. I didn't know what to face. And you see all the movies, you know what I'm saying? And even though the law enforcement, they play that up. They're like, oh yeah, like Big Bubba's going to be your cellie. They play on those stereotypes, especially
Mm-hmm.
as a young white kid. Law enforcement is really bad. It's awful the things that they say to people. And most of the time they say these things to people because they want you to cooperate or they want you to snitch. So it's just terrible that the way that the whole criminal justice system is set up and the way it plays out. But yeah, when I went to prison, I was scared. And plus, like, look, when I went into prison, I was like that first wave of marijuana LSD guys. Like I was that first wave when the feds went out into the suburbs. Before that, like when they started the federal sentencing guidelines and mandatory minimums and the modern war on drugs, it was 1988. They were going after all the
Mm-hmm.
crack dealers, all the inner city guys. So when I went in federal prison, it was 75% black. So, I grew up in California, so I grew up a little bit multicultural, but still, it was a shock, as a white kid going in, to like, a prison and it's 75% black and it's, like all, a lot of gang bangers,
Mm-hmm.
drug lords, and this was like the beginning of the age of gangster rap. So like everybody kind of carried it like that. So yeah, it was scary, but I had to adjust, I had to, that's the one thing with prison, man. Like, even if you're scared, you can't show that you're scared, man. They'll eat you up. And, and, and really when it comes down to it, it's not even the other races that'll eat you up. It's your own people. Your own race will eat you up and exploit you. That's how it is. The worst thing, is that, that your own race will do it to you. So yeah, man, I had to grow up and I had to get tough, real quick. Cause, before prison, I was probably, I was probably entitled to a certain extent. I was probably spoiled to a certain extent. And, uh, I was a little kid, who had grown up, kind of sheltered, in a way in the suburbs,
Mm-hmm.
So, and like I say, my parents were rich, but, they were like middle class, upper middle class, so, we didn't want for anything, I had a good all American upbringing. So, being thrown into that world into prison was culture shock for me. And I had to grow up real quick because, I didn't have friends or relatives that were in prison. I didn't grow up in that culture, where a culture of crime or culture of the streets or, like the mafia or the Dixie mafia or drug lords where, that was, all that stuff was happening and people were getting killed or, people were going to prison. I grew up in the suburbs, where, and in the college scene where everybody was just partying, getting high and stuff and everybody was just expected to go party for 4 years and then move on with their life, and get a career or whatever. So that's what was expected of me. That's the world I grew up in. So when I went in there, yeah, it was it was a complete like 180 for me. I was like, man, I was like, where am I at? So I had to like
Mm-hmm.
grow up like really fast. Like it was like either grow up and become a man or something really bad can happen to you, so I had to like, I had to like whatever they call it, like, man up or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And like you say, people challenge you, people try you, and you got to fight. That's all you can do. You just got to fight, and you got to hope it doesn't turn into some serious beef where somebody wants to stab you or something. But you have to defend yourself. You got to stand up for yourself because if you don't, people will walk all over you and worse. So
Yeah.
that's kind of how it went. And luckily, I would say luckily too. At that time I was like six. I was six, I'm 6'1", but at that time I was probably like 185. So I hit the weights. I put on some muscle. Plus, I was always good at athlete growing up, so I started playing sports. And it's weird, like in an alpha male world, like if you're good at sports, I mean, people kind of look up to you, in a way.
Hmm.
And I think another two things that really helped me is, I got Italian last name, and I was on the East Coast, so a lot of the mafia guys gravitated to me because of the Italian heritage. And another thing that helped me was, I grew up in California, and even though I was on prison on the East Coast, like wherever you're from, those are like your homeboys. And a lot of my homeboys were like the Mexican gangbangers, like the Sureños, because they were
Hmm.
like the only dudes from California. And maybe there was only like four or five of them, but those dudes had the reputation of basically being like the toughest, most vicious dudes on the yard. So I come in, I'm only 22, I got 25 years. Immediately the mafia guys are coming to me because of my Italian last name. And immediately the Mexican Sereno gangbangers are coming to me because I grew up in California. Because I tell people, like, where are you from? I'm from California.
Hmm.
So I'm immediately being associated with these two different groups that get a lot of respect in prison. And then I got 25 years too. So people are like, well, I guess, he must be somebody. He got 25 years. He's not in here on, some petty, charge. And then, like I say, right when I got there, I started playing sports, and I was good at sports. So, I had a pretty, besides some fights, I had to fight every now and then, but besides some fights, I had a pretty easy adjustment.
So this is kind of an interesting question to ask because people don't consider, good things happening to people in prison. But a lot of people turn their life around and find their passion in prison, and I think that's the case for you. You can tell me if I'm wrong, but you started writing when you were in prison. But I'm curious, like, what would be the best thing that happened to you? Something that really changed your perspective, changed your life, changed your path while you were in prison.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, just because like when you go to prison, man, it's like everything you were before is kind of stripped down. Like you're stripped down to nothing, because I mean, everybody got to wear khakis, everybody got to wear, gray sweatsuits, money doesn't really matter. It's who you are on the inside. It's like, your ideals and your ethics and your word. Like they got a saying in there, like they say in prison, like the only two things you got is your word and your balls,
Mm-hmm.
so really just going to prison, especially as a young kid, I mean, I grew to be a man in prison. And like I say, I mean, yes, it was harsh conditions, and yes, there's like a twisted sense of ideals, and yes, some of the ideals that help you survive in there are not suited to help you survive in the world. But I kind of thrived. I kind of fell in, to the role. But at the same time, it's like you got to put this mask on, man. Like every day when you wake up, you got to put this mask on because you gotta project, like, don't mess with me. I'm dangerous. If you know if you mess with me, like I'll tear your head off. So you kind of
Mm-hmm.
got to put this mask on and play this role. And then if somebody does try you, then you gotta go full force. Or like I'm saying, it could be your life or worse. But yeah, I just think the biggest thing for me was just becoming a man. I became a man, behind those fences.
Mm-hmm.
And, once I became a man and I was secure with myself as a man, then I started to look in for like, what can I do for my future?
Mm-hmm.
So once, first it was like I had to get my security in there to make sure I was safe. I felt safe. So then once I felt safe, then I was like, okay, yeah, I got all this time, but what can I start doing now? That's going to help me be successful when I get out. And that's when I got into the college classes, the writing, doing all the books and getting, the college degrees. And that was all kind of like a setup for when I did touch down in 2015. I was ready for the world. I had some skills. I had some accolades. I had some recognition for my writing. I had a body of work. I had a network of support, contacts that I built up with editors. So then when I got out, I didn't have to work McDonald's. I
Hmm.
started writing articles for Vice. I was doing features for Penthouse. So, I made a way. I created a way for me. So when I got out, I had a life.
So you made how did you make those contacts while you were in prison? Were you writing articles while you were still incarcerated or?
No, I started. So how I did that was, I used to get a ton of magazines. And
Hmm.
like on all the magazines, they have a masthead, and they usually have the address, like the publication headquarters, and they say like the editor, assistant editor, who's in charge of
Hmm.
different sections. So what I did is, first I took some journalism courses, like through Penn State and University of Iowa, and then I just started writing, man, to the people. Like I would get the magazine, and I would see stuff, and I'm like, man, I could write stuff for this place, and I would start writing the editors like snail mail. And like
Hmm.
I just didn't write one letter. Like I would write like hundreds of letters. Like dudes in prison thought I was crazy. I was the type of dude, I would go to the mailbox and I would have like 100 letters.
Wow.
And I would do this like, once or twice a month. And so that's how I did it,
What
man.
were you writing? What were you writing? Were you writing about stories, or what were you
I
writing
was
about?
writing, the first big success I had was writing about prison basketball.
Okay.
So I was writing stories about like prison basketball, like what was going on, interviewing different guys that were really, really good, like the superstars in prison,
That's cool.
interviewing them, telling their stories. So was my first big success. And then my second big success was I started writing about the street legends. I started interviewing, the guys that were kind of lionized in the lyrical lore of hip hop, because like gangster rap, like 95, gangster rap is huge,
Oh
right?
yeah.
And so, I'm hearing, I played basketball. So, I grew up on hip hop too. I was a big NWA fan. So, I was like one of the white dudes that would be accepted like in the black TV room. And I would, back then we would listen to like MTV Raps and later BET. And you would hear these, all these rappers, 50 Cent, Jay-Z, all these other guys, and they would talk about like the guys, from their neighborhoods. And like then, I would hear the talking there, like the dudes be like, "Oh yeah, he's on A Block," and I'd be like, "What? That dude's here?" And then
Hmm.
and that's how I got the eye to start writing about him. Because at first, when I first got in, like I was around a bunch of Colombian drug lords, around a mafiosos. I'd call my mom and I'd be like, "Oh, find me a book on this dude. Find me a book, or print me, send me some magazines or whatever." But then when it got to the African American dudes, I would call my mom. They're being lauded in hip hop and lionizing hip hop, but I call my mom and she's like, "There's no books on these guys." So then that's where I got the idea. I'm like, man, I'm gonna write the books on these guys.
Mm.
So I was already doing some journalism then, and then so I started writing. I started interviewing these guys, and that's what I would just send it out, man, in mails, and eventually, with like email and stuff. I would get my she was my girlfriend, and then we got married in prison, and now she's my wife. She's basically like my right hand for my publishing house. She would, take my stuff that I typed on a prison typewriter, my interview article, she would scan it and she would email it to all these different publishers. And that's how I started,
That's awesome.
building up contacts.
That's an incredible story. So did you, kind of getting to the White Boy documentary? Were you in prison with Richard Worshey Jr.?
I was never locked up with him, but I started writing to him around 2005. So, I was in a couple federal prisons in West Virginia, and there was a
Hmm.
lot of Detroit guys. So I had already been writing a lot about like the New York and DC street legends. So when I was in West Virginia around a lot of Detroit dudes, they were talking about this guy, White Boy Rick. And White Boy Rick, I was like, who's this dude, White Boy Rick? This white kid who supposedly ran the black underworld, right? And I was like,
Hmm.
this is crazy. And I really identified with him because we were like around the same age. We both kind of got busted young, and we both got like a shitload of time. Even though he was a cocaine dealer and I was like a weed and psychedelics, he was like a non-violent dude. So there were some similarities, and I kind of identified with him. So I started writing him. He was in a different prison. I'd have my wife write him, and she would like relay the red messages between us. And at first I wanted to write his story for like my Street Legends series, the book Street Legends that I had out with all these gangsters, which
Hmm.
I write about these dudes like Billy the Kid or Jesse James type figures, and he was writing me back, and he was telling me this totally different story.
Mm.
Like he was like, no, I was an informant. I was set up. It's all corrupt cops, and I was like, I was like, this doesn't fit into like the story that I want to write. So it took me a couple years at first, to figure out like, how am I going to write this dude's story? But then the longer I was in prison and the older I got and the wiser I got, about the system and everything that was happening, and then like the racial injustice started coming into it, the systematic oppression, the targeting of minorities. And I started seeing the war on drugs and law enforcement for what it really was. I kind of started writing different, where first I was writing, like about the mythology and the legends of these guys as Billy the Kid type figures. Then I started looking at, like 10 years in, after I'd been writing for about 5 or 6 years, I started looking at it more like from a criminal justice reform, or advocacy type of mind frame. And then when I started doing that, then I'm like, okay, Rick, I can write about your story now. You're like a victim of the war on drugs, what they did to you, was crazy. What are they doing? Using a 14-year-old kid as an informant. That's insane. That's like against all ethics and boundaries, but, first when I was younger, being in prison, like, oh, it's like informant, like, no, you don't even want to be around that word informant. That's like a dirty word in there. That's like, you don't want to be branded as an informant. You don't even want to be branded, you don't even want to be around somebody who's considered a snitch or informant. So, so it took me, a couple years, or, probably like a decade for me to grow out of the mentalities, but I kept in touch with him because I was always intrigued by his story. And then I started writing. I did some stories for like The Fix, Vice News while I was in, about the injustice of his case. And then when I got out, that kind of led to the, movie, because I met Sean Reck, Transition Studios, and I pitched him the idea, and he was looking for a film. He had just done his first film, his first feature doc, Murder in the Park, was on Showtime, and he was looking for his next film. And he knew the movie, White Boy Rick movie, was about to be made. So he was like, man, you got access to all this? I was like, yeah. And he's like, we can base it off all your writings. I'm like, yeah. Mm-hmm. And so, we did it. He kind of took me under his wing. I learned a lot from him. He taught me a lot. He was a 9-time Emmy-winning, filmmaker in Ohio, regional Emmys, but he's won 9 Emmys for he did a bunch of Crime Stopper TV shows, like 200. That's kind of how he cut his teeth. And, yeah, he kind of took me under his wing, like I wasn't even out like a year, maybe 18 months when I met him, and I brought this story to him, and he took me under his wing. And that was the main thing I said. I said, look, I can bring you everything you need for the story, but I want you to teach me how to make films. I knew how to tell a story. I knew how to write, but I needed to learn how to make films because that's what I wanted to do. To me, that was the next evolution, as a writer. You kind of go from journalist, to book writer, to documentarian, to, I see like my next step after documentaries is, I want to do like feature films, like narratives, like wow. Big budget, indies. So, yeah. I kind of see I don't mind. I don't got to jump right to the end. I can take the steps and learn everything I need to learn.
That's incredible. So you were speaking of the White Boy Rick movie, and I was confused at first because I saw the movie with Matthew McConaughey first before I saw your documentary. Did they get this story relatively right from a movie standpoint, or did they get things?
I don't know.
Wrong
movies, man. Movies, it's always they got this certain formula. So
yeah, they gotta have the love interest. They gotta have
they kind of mix it up. They kind of move the stuff around. I don't know. I thought the movie could have been a lot better, and I thought the movie, they got Matthew McConaughey, so they really got to feature him as the dad. So I just think it could have been more like a victim of the drug war story. I mean, I like the movie. I mean, it looks good. It's cool. They got some good acting. I just felt like they kind of scrunched up the story, to fit the movie format. And it just could have been so much more. And they didn't go down a lot of the corruption rabbit holes like we did in the doc. So I just think, everybody tells me that the doc is a lot better. And I just think that the doc is, shows a more, thorough view of what really happened.
Yeah.
You know, where I think the movie just bypasses a lot of stuff. I mean, he's a victim of the war on drugs, and the movie did not paint that. The Hollywood movie did not paint that at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's one of the best documentaries I've seen. The interviews are incredible.
Yeah.
You know, interviewing I forget the one guy's name who he was a hired hitman.
Yeah, Nate Booncraft. Yeah.
Yeah, and throughout the documentary, it looks like he's still in prison, and then you see him walk out. He's like,
we did that on purpose. We wanted to do that. That was Sean Rex idea. You know, he came up with that. I was there for all the interviews. I actually worked the side camera on that interview. So, you know, not only did I write and produce, but I did some of the camera stuff too. You know, I just filled in wherever necessary. But you know, it was cool. He brought me to all the shoots. You know, like I say, and then a lot of times Sean, like you know, he would like sit in the director's chair and ask all the questions, and then like the last couple minutes, you know, before we broke, he might let me sit in the chair for like, you know, 3, 4, 5 minutes and ask some questions. You know, like at the end of the set or the end of the interview. So yeah, he really went all out, man, and helped me and taught me a lot. You know, I'm forever indebted to him for that.
That's awesome, man. I look forward to see what's coming for you next in your career. We're out of time here, but I want you to, plug White Boy Rick, or plug White Boy, the documentary on Netflix again. Tell people again why they should watch it. Maybe your favorite thing about it, something like that. And then anything else you're working on. Where can people find your work? Where can they follow you on social media? All that good stuff.
Yeah, definitely, man. If you want to see a mesmerizing, crazy story about what law enforcement and the FBI, like what lengths they're willing to go to, you know, definitely watch White Boy. Because, you know, people always talk about like, you know, what criminals will do to make $1, but, you know, they don't talk about like what law enforcement will do to make a case. And like what they did in Richard Wershe's case, man, and that whole situation. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, they basically like prostituted a 14-year-old kid. And then when they were done with him, they just kicked him to the curb. And then when he started complaining about it, they gave him a life sentence. I mean, it's crazy, and just buried him. So I'm saying, man, if you want to see like what police corruption is really about, especially in Detroit, you know, watch White Boy. And yeah, because stories like this need to be told, man, because this type of stuff is happening all the time, especially throughout this whole war on drugs. And it's just been, you know, swept under the rug. But, you know, this story kind of exposes it. It's not the only story. I mean, and to say the only reason, you know, a lot of people care about this story is because he's white. You know, this stuff is happening to minorities every day still. So this is something that really needs to be looked at and really be examined so that, you know, we can move ahead and law enforcement can do a better job, and, you know, the ones that are doing the wrong thing can be exposed. But yeah, if you want to check out my books, you know, I got 22 books on gangsters, you know, drug lords, you know, gangbangers, prison life, all nonfiction. They're all on Amazon, but you can also go to SethFerranti.com. That's my website. And if you order a book there, you know, I'll send you an autographed copy. And then I got a bunch of films, man. I got a bunch of films. I'm working on you know, I got this one called Nightlife that's about to come out next year. It's about the violence in North St. Louis. I got a series I'm doing on Humboldt County, a 4-part docuseries on Humboldt County about the like the OG outlaw growers that have now turned legal and the problems they're facing. And then I got a trilogy series on the LSD trade, you know, that goes all the way back to the 60s, all the way through the war on drugs, all the way till now. So that's kind of like my 3 big projects, you know, that are coming out now.
That's incredible. I can't wait to see all that stuff, and we'll have to have you back on down the road. Seth Ferranti, thank you so much for coming on the show.
All right. Thanks, man. I appreciate it, John.